Okay, so welcome to Eat, Move, Think, the show about optimal wellness brought to you by Medcan.
Wow. Do it again.
Oh, I was practicing. Okay, ready?
Welcome to
Eat, Move, Think.
The show about
Optimal
wellness
brought to you
by
Medcan.
Yeah, this is extremely good. Thank you.
Okay, Chris, what do you think is the best form of exercise? Like, easiest. You can do it wherever you want, whenever you want, no equipment. You don't have to spend any money.
No equipment. Swimming?
I
Equipment. I guess that has to happen in a
requires water.
pool. Okay, running?
Running is a
not
good
accessible
guess.
to everybody, though.
Not accessible to everybody, but the most accessible.
Gotta be walking.
It's walking. Yeah, okay, yes.
Yeah.
We both walk to work on a regular basis.
Love walking.
Yeah, walking has a lot of unique benefits, actually.
If you talk to a lot of exercise physiologists, a lot of MDs, they will almost universally sing the praises of walking. Low impact.
Yeah, it's a great way to start other things going as well in terms of building a routine.
So if you're not doing anything, then the form of exercise that you start is walking.
It's been over 160 episodes of Eat, Move, Think, and this is the first time we're covering it. So
Pretty excited.
pretty excited. And I'd recommend you listen to this episode while going for a walk. Grab your shoes.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jazz. We're the producers of Eat, Move, Think.
And in this episode on walking, we have...
Yes, we have our Move host, Dr. Andrew Miners, and he's joined by Medcan MD, Dr. Nelson Ferreira. They're going to break down the benefits of walking, the health changes that can happen when you go from no exercise to some exercise, and why walking really is the best way to start a fitness routine that's realistic and enjoyable, but also tailored to your individual needs.
This sounds great. You recorded a number of stories involving starting exercise regimens.
We have some amazing stories from radio personality and podcaster Dave Paul, whose podcast Walking is Fitness is a really inspiring story and community for walkers. We also have Raysa Hidalgo. We have audio from her. She was one of Dr. Andrew Miner's clients at Medcan, and she went from wanting to do zero exercise at all to craving it when she doesn't get a workout in.
I'm really excited about this episode.
Me too. So let's throw it to Dr. Andrew Miners. Here he is talking to Dr. Nelson Ferreira.
Hi, Eat, Move, Think listeners. I'm Dr. Andrew Miners, and I'm here with Medcan medical physician Dr. Nelson Ferreira. And we're here to talk about the single best thing that a sedentary person can do to improve their life. Now, when I say that, the small caveat to that is if you're a non-smoker. So if you're a smoker, that's the thing you need to do to improve your health. But assuming you're a non-smoker, what's the single best thing you can do? And it's to start exercising. And everybody listening to this probably knows that because this is a health and wellness podcast. But some of the things you may not know is how to do that, how to get in there. What's the single best way to jump in for someone to go from doing nothing to doing something? And one of the things we're going to talk about is going for a walk. Now, Dr. Ferreira, you have become a walker.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for introducing me, Andy. So I am a walker. I've been a long time walker.
How have you started walking more recently?
Well, I'll tell you what, I have a funny story. So I'm sure your listeners probably know that the TTC sometimes breaks down.
No, it doesn't.
That's what I've heard and that's what I've experienced. So I was on the TTC. And now, prior to this, I was a walker, but about 4 weeks ago, the TTC broke down. And this was roughly at around rush hour, and they provided shuttle buses, and I was thinking about an Uber, and then I realized it was going to take me forever. So I just decided to get out of the TTC and walk home. Well, it took me 2 hours.
You're kidding.
I felt great. My mind was clear. I did all the work I had to do. I took a shower, got up the next morning to go to work. TTC breaks down again. So I walked approximately an hour and 15 minutes that day. Then suddenly it dawned on me this was just a great way to introduce more exercise into my life. I'm always up early anyway. So I got myself dressed and geared and started walking to work. And it turns out that I live fairly close to the TTC subway line. So I walked along Bloor Street.
Right.
And it turns out that my home in the West End is approximately 9 kilometers from where I end up getting back on the TTC at about St. George Station. So it's now become a routine. I walk on the weekends, and now I walk to work at least twice a week.
Excellent. So cumulatively, it's 9 kilometers one way, 9 kilometers back.
Right. But I got to be honest with you, folks. I only walk one way. I got to work all day. I'm not the man I used to be. So I take the TTC back. So I now have two options for the better way, my feet and the TTC.
You mentioned that you felt great that first time you went out and walked. So if you found that the same thing, you wake up, you're craving this walk, that you want to walk. And how do you feel after this walk? You're not drained for the day. You said you're energized.
Yeah, absolutely. So it turns out that I actually surprised myself because when I got to work, I'm fortunate that I'm able to shower at work, clean myself up, and start the day. And I have had my best days since on my walk days to work. Since I started, my mind is clear. I have more energy. Food tastes better, definitely tastes better, actually. And so I'm able to get through the day and feel quite energized and also good about myself because I feel like I got a reasonable amount of exercise in for the day.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You're inspiring me to try to do that too. Although I live in Markham, which is a bit of a longer
That's
walk.
a bit of a long haul. I'm not sure they have TTC. Do they have TTC?
Go train.
Yeah.
So
Hope for a breakdown.
a lot of people, when they run or when they walk, listen to things or do things or think about things. Well, how do you engage yourself during that time? Do you just looking around walking, or are you talking on the phone to people, or are you listening to music? What do you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've sometimes listened to music. That's not the most common experience. You know how you're driving along and you drive the same route practically every day or every week, and you don't notice all the signs and all the houses that you're passing. Well, I actually take it as an opportunity to slow things down, pay attention to my surroundings, and use it as a stress reduction strategy. And I think that might be part of the reason that when I get here, I feel so good and so energized for the rest of the day. I have a very clear mind when I get to work.
Fantastic, because we know that exercise has positive impacts on mental health.
Absolutely. I hope we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
We most definitely will. Now, thinking about health and wellness and just how you've been feeling and how you walking to work has been such a positive experience, being a physician and being a physician who's experienced in exercise and fitness, has that changed or impacted the way you're communicating to your patients?
Absolutely. So it turns out that prior to the TTC experience, what I was saying to my patients is exactly the theme of this podcast. How do we go from essentially zero to something? How do we start? And I would say to my patients, look, you know what? If you can do nothing else, go for a walk, because that gives you a lot of benefits you may not have realized. In other words, we can sometimes pressure ourselves thinking, listen, I got to lift weights, I got to do HIIT programs, I got to run a triathlon. And sometimes the pressure itself sort of short circuits your good intentions. So I say, listen, start off with a walk. It can be very simple, 15 minutes before work, after work, during a lunch hour, and then take it from there. Just start, because I think sometimes that's the hardest part.
True. Going to a gym can be daunting. You know, a HIIT class, if you've never done one, can definitely be daunting.
Yeah.
That's right, especially if you've been sedentary your whole life and you haven't done much. And we know, from recent research that in Canada, only about 50% of adults, meet the minimum recommended or the recommended guidelines for around exercise. It's sort of 1 in 2 are only meeting it, so half the population isn't. And so for those sedentary people, it's really hard to get starting. And walking, as you said, is that and just set us a reasonable target to get started and get out and get moving. And we know that exercise is good for you, but sometimes just the amount of exercise that people think they need to do to have a positive health outcome can be daunting.
Absolutely. And sometimes you can feel overwhelmed just thinking about it. There's some recent research that suggests that even 11 minutes of walking per day can affect various conditions, and that even a little bit more exercise, just beyond that, improves all-cause mortality. So if you were to bundle up all reasons that people experience illness and death, exercise on a regular basis can improve virtually every illness we can think of. So it truly is an elixir for helping people to feel better, feel stronger, feel healthier, and it looks like live longer.
So if it was a drug, everybody should be taking this.
Everybody should be taking it, and virtually no side effects. Virtually
no side effects. Now, the current guidelines in Canada, so the 2020 guidelines, suggest 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous exercise a week, right? If you break that down, it's about 30 minutes 5 times a week.
Right.
And that 150 minutes, that's 150 minutes for someone who's not doing anything.
Right.
And they think moderate to vigorous. What's moderate to vigorous mean? And maybe you could talk us through that. But we know that, doing something is better than nothing. So what if people can't make that 150 minutes? And you're saying 11 minutes a day, which works out to be 77. If you look at 11 minutes, 7 days a week.
Right. So some of the studies suggest that even 75 minutes per week, that's how they broke it down to approximately 11 minutes per day, can actually benefit people, particularly if you're sedentary. And like most things, for example, let's say somebody feels they need to lose weight. Somebody who has a lot of weight to lose is going to benefit more just by losing the first several pounds than somebody who only has a very little amount of weight to lose. Same with activity. So if you've been inactive, don't feel discouraged. Even small amounts of exercise will likely improve your health, make you feel better, and usually leads on to better things in the future so that you can get on to perhaps an even more vigorous program. But you don't need to be afraid or overwhelmed that you need to be the best right away.
Right. So even doing a little bit will help your overall health and have an impact towards reducing your all-cause mortality over time.
Absolutely. And that's an important key, all-cause mortality.
Now, when we look at walking, like what other things make walking good, do you think, is that gateway access to exercise?
Well, first of all, there's a number of things that we could talk about. First of all, there's the ease and simplicity. Of course, unless somebody has a disability of some kind, walking is available to everyone, period. You don't necessarily need any kind of expertise. Number two, it can be virtually done anywhere. It can be virtually done anytime. And then I think from a medical perspective, I always talk about the biomechanical aspects. You engage a lot of muscles and joints when you walk. You may not think it, but right from your toes, almost all the way up to your head, you are engaging some, if not all, of the muscles in your body. You have to swing your arms. You have to engage your core, your knees, your hips, your back. All of these things improve just from walking. And I know this from personal experience. So walking has the benefit that not only can most people understand what they need to do, but overall, it gives you a lot of benefits almost from head to toe.
Yeah, exercise is medicine, motion is lotion, and it's just moving.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I agree with that. It's a great way to look at it. You do use your whole body. Like people think, oh, it's just a walk, but it's a walk that's moving your whole body. It's good for your mind. Fantastic. So I'm going to introduce Dave Paul.
Hi, I'm Dave. I'm the host of the daily 10-minute podcast, Walking is Fitness.
Now, he's a radio personality that started walking as a challenge, but now has made it sort of a hobby, a way of life. And I'm going to let him tell his story.
On January 2nd, 2013, my employer offered everybody a Fitbit. And I remember, of course, thinking that 10,000 steps was the magical number and ran my 3 miles. I was far short of 10,000 steps, which surprised me, shocked me even. So I walked another mile to get closer to 10,000 steps. And that became my pattern for about 5 months. And then I'll never forget, I was getting ready to run my 3 miles. And I thought, I'm going to start walking for fitness, and got the idea for a blog. And at the very beginning of the blog, I made a public commitment to walk 20,000 steps every day. I began the daily 10-minute podcast in November 2021. And so my target listener was someone in the first couple of weeks of beginning a brand new fitness journey by walking. I had no idea, no expectation. And it's so humbling and gratifying. I'm getting messages from folks who are saying, literally, this podcast is changing my life. And for so many, that 10 minutes is really hard. A lot of times when we get started pursuing fitness, there is some goal that we want to achieve. And the problem with fitness and exercise is progress is really incremental. And so we get started in this vat of emotion that dies off after a week or two, and we really don't feel any better. In fact, we might even feel worse. And so many of us set the journey aside because the goal doesn't seem to be working. Instead, what I talk to my listeners about is let's make a promise to yourself to walk for 10 minutes a day, or whatever that promise is for you. And every day that you keep that promise, you are adding a link to a fitness chain. It becomes additional motivation to keep that promise on those days when it really is hard.
So Dave mentions this concept of, instead of making yourself a goal, regardless of how small that goal was, is to make it a promise to yourself. I kind of like that idea. What do you think, Nelson?
I love that idea. So I think a promise has a higher order spiritual commitment, perhaps, than feeling like something that you need to do on your to-do list. One of my other strategies, and I don't know what Dave would think about this, is that I make promises to my wife and to friends in the neighborhood. And we also go on walks. So I know on those days when I really don't feel like it, somebody's holding me to account because I made them a promise. Hopefully they feel like they made me a promise.
Absolutely. You know, it reminds me of a previous podcast that we did with Dr. Jennifer Heiss. Now, she was talking about exercise the body to heal the mind. And she talked about how to get started exercising. And she talked about scheduling it. And that's kind of like making a promise to yourself. You know, you make a promise to another person. And you also know that when you're doing exercise with other people, you have, other than just the benefits of exercising with your mental health, you get that social interaction, which can be beneficial.
Definitely.
So you can get a number of different ways to approach that.
I just had my annual physical exam a month ago. I'm almost 63, and it gave me an A+. So all of those health markers are still looking really good. So because I began pursuing fitness 15 years ago, you know, what those future benefits, those future goals, what felt abstract at the time, I'm now reaping the real world benefits of those. Of course, walking can lower the stress that you're feeling and anxiety. It can boost your brain, creativity. It's just a fun way to not only impact future health, but also how you're feeling right now. Goal number 1 is to create a fitness habit, doing a fitness activity, walking every day, even if it's just going to the mailbox and back, or the length of the podcast, Walking is Fitness, 10 minutes. Creating that habit, start really, really small. And then before you even realize it, it's like, oh, this is fun. I'm enjoying this. And those 10-minute walks become 15, 20, 30 minutes. You're walking the 10,000 steps. You're even thinking, wonder if I could do 12,000 steps. And there is no commitment that is too small. If you are able to walk with a little bit of intensity and some intentionality, you've got exercise hiding in plain sight.
Walking is one of those ways. It has a certain kind of intimacy because you're not distracted by things like your phone, the chores that you have to do at home, the TV, the internet. So it has almost like a connective kind of value so that people can spend a bit more time talking, connecting, enjoying nature together, especially if you're doing it outside, which would be my recommendation. That's all good for the mind. That's all good for the soul.
So do it with friends, do it outside.
Yes, that'd be
have
great.
a good time doing it.
Yeah.
That sounds excellent.
I try to get that done every weekend if I can. And I drag my wife out of bed early to make sure it happens.
Nice. That's great. Now, it depends on the level of pain or impairment, but we know motion is lotion. Even for mild to moderate osteoarthritic change in the hip and knee, exercise is important. And walking is an exercise that you can do that. So if someone who's a listener that is thinking about, I need a new knee or I need a new hip, and they're concerned about their health and wellness moving forward, starting even a small walking program could be beneficial. Do you think that's accurate?
I do think that's accurate. In fact, I have a little bit of personal experience with this. So first of all, I agree with you, Andy, that there is research saying that in mild to moderate arthritis of knee and hip, you can benefit from certain kinds of exercise programs, including walking. And sometimes when we talk about arthritis, in our minds, we see an x-ray and all we see is a bone. But there's a lot of soft tissue in those joints. And walking has the effect, I believe, of engaging some of that soft tissue and improving compliance, elasticity. And so myself, for example, I was having some right hip pain and I decided to up my game, as it were, for walking. And this is before the TTC journey. And I found that as long as I kept walking, my right hip felt dramatically better. So discomfort went down from, let's say 6 or 7 out of 10 down to a 1. And on those weeks where I miss a lot of my, my normal walking routine, the hip starts to stiffen up. So exactly what you said, motion is lotion. And there's evidence to back that up.
Absolutely. So strong in equals strong out. So also getting into an exercise routine such as walking before a surgical procedure probably increases your probabilities of having a healthier response and being able to exercise afterwards too.
I think that makes totally sense, yes.
Now, I think we're agreed walking is good.
Walking is good, yeah.
And doing something is better than doing nothing.
Definitely.
Now, when I talk to patients, and especially as patients get older, there's more things that you can do. In fact, medically speaking and fitness perspective, doing more than just walking is also beneficial. When we think about elderly people who might be having osteopenia or osteoporosis, doing weight-bearing or loading-based exercises is important, as well as improving strength and preventing falls as we move. And there's also recent research that we actually talked about it on this show. So Dr. Jessica Gorlitz talked about the prostate, lung, colorectal, ovarian cancer screening trial and looked at, that was one of the first sort of studies looking at in elderly people specifically, but just young people as well, that adding in resistance training is really important to an overall health and wellness and reducing, again, all-cause mortality. So maybe we talk about how someone can go from starting, doing nothing to doing something in walking to maybe progressing into doing other things like resistance training or different types of exercise.
Yeah, and I think you're right on the money there, because I believe that resistance exercise is important for a number of reasons. Having strength is important, especially as we get older. But actually, not only that, but engaging in those exercises improves your coordination and balance. In other words, just the fact that you have to lift something carefully and thoughtfully means you're going to probably put your joints through a certain kind of range of motion, and that will benefit you. And I personally believe that there are certain things we can do that aid us as we get a little bit older, if that's an issue, or if you're about to go for surgery. One of them is things like not only strength, but balance. And I have some specific strategies I use myself. I think that overall, strength training, using resistance training, whether that's with weights or body weight, can be a very important component of a physical fitness program, as well as improving to prevent illness in the future. So not just that you feel fit, that you're stronger, but you prevent illness and prevent problems. Some simple things like a fall can be disastrous as people get older.
This whole conversation reminds me of a patient that I had. Now, I've got her consent to use her name here, so just saying that out in the beginning.
My name is Raysa Hidalgo. I'm an executive at one of the financial institutions here in Toronto, and I've been with Medcan since 2016.
Raysa came in, she was having musculoskeletal-based pain around her neck and shoulders, so posture-related myofascial-based pain from long hours of sitting. And she walks into my office, first time I'm meeting her as a new patient, she says to me, "I'm not going to do any exercise, so don't tell me to do." So I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's funny you say that, because I use exercise prescription and encouragement and active engagement in people's recovery, and I use exercise for that with everybody. And so she shut me down even before I had a chance to offer it.
He told me, well, you had to do some exercises at home after I do this therapy. That's the way it's going to help you. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do anything. Don't give me exercises. I do not like doing exercises. I'm just being honest with you. And he was like stunned, like looking at me like, okay, well, if you don't do the exercises at home, these alone won't help you. And I reluctantly took the piece of paper and said, oh, okay, I'll give it a try. So that was my mindset at the time. Number one, it was like I had no time. I worked long hours. I had, executive responsibilities, and I would make up any excuse to not go to workout. Like I have a gym in my building that is 10 steps from my door. It was that bad, right? But then eventually I was like, okay, I need a trainer if I really want to do something, and I got a trainer at Medcan. Then the pandemic hit. There was nothing to do, but I really got into it. And then the gym opened again, and I started trying to go twice a week. And gradually I really got to like it. I got into a routine, and then my body, I could see the changes in my body. I had less injuries. I felt better. My mood had, improved considerably. I had more energy. I was sleeping better. So I started to see all those benefits. I was like, oh, wow, that's so exciting. So yeah, it's part of my life now. And I go twice to Medcan, and then I try to go 2 or 3 more times in my building's gym.
I still see Raysa now and then for aches and pains that arise, but she has completely transitioned.
Wow.
Now she exercises all the time. And the last time I saw her, I was giggling about it because she was talking about how she started running.
Wow.
And she's working out with a personal trainer, and she's being fit. And she made the comment that says, you know what? I miss it when I don't do it.
Fantastic.
And I started giggling because do you remember the first time I saw you?
I had to change my routine and become a morning person. So slowly I started getting up earlier and earlier until I got used to it. And I go to the gym first thing in the morning when I set my condo because it's easier. I get it out of the way, then I can focus on work and I'm not worried. I did my routine and I had the energy to do the work. So I really strongly recommend anyone to try to do that. Start slowly. Like I would go like half an hour earlier, gradually until I got used to it. And now I get up, 6:30 a.m. I get ready to go to the gym, do my routine, and then shower, get ready to get to work. I really think it's important to have a trainer because they help you, correct things that you do that are not right. And they get you into that discipline and they push you, right? They get you to the next milestone. If you do it by yourself all the time, you may find that you don't progress as fast as having a trainer. Once you get into it, your body will ask for it. Like when I go on vacation and I have, there's not options for me to go to a gym, my body asks for it. I feel like I miss working out. So when that becomes part of your life, you don't think about it. You do it, right? So it's getting there that is difficult. And the rewards of that investment is just like any other investment you could do in your life.
Andy, that's a great story about your patient. And I know from personal experience that my patients love seeing you and you guide them along this fitness and wellness journey.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah, they're grateful for that. It reminds me of a story I had. I had a gentleman come to me who's actually a priest. And he's high up in the administrative capacities of the Catholic Church in Ontario. Anyway, he has a lot of responsibility. He has a lot of stress. And we were looking at his blood tests and some of these issues. And he said, I really would like to exercise. I just don't know what to do. And I said, listen, do you take a lunchtime? Yes, I do. Why don't you go out for a walk? Just start 5 minutes a day. Break the cycle of being the kind of person that thinks you have to do some great things in order to actually have some benefits. So start small, take a 5-minute walk. Anyway, I went through the whole walking thing like we just did today. Next year, I see him again for his assessment, and he's lost 15 pounds. A lot of his blood tests have dramatically improved. And I said, wow, good for you. We went to the exam room, and when we were in the exam room, he turns to me suddenly after telling me his walking story, and he says, hey, how many push-ups can you do?
He challenges you?
He challenges me. And I'm like, what? He says, how many push-ups can you do? I go, I don't know. He goes, I do 150 push-ups every lunch hour.
Wow.
I said, you do not do 150 push-ups every lunch hour. He was so proud of himself, he actually got down and knocked off about 25 push-ups instantaneously and easy right in front of my eyes right there. And I'm like, holy fitness, Padre.
Wow.
I said, that's great. So he that was his exercise routine. Walking was the gateway into doing a little bit more. But I think, again, as we've already mentioned, the positive mental health benefits that he got, not just from the physical activity, but from knowing he did it. He took a small step and it led to bigger things.
Totally. And that's with Raysa too. It's just getting out there, starting, and the next thing you know, you're into it. For lack of a better word, you're addicted to it. It's part of your life and it makes you feel good. And that's really key. Now, in both of those situations, with Raysa and the priest, they started small.
Yes.
Right. And they, through their own pathway, they started doing more. Do you have any recommendations in how someone, might progress from just starting walking and move forward?
If you start on your walking journey, what I've experienced and what I recommend is adding a little bit more if you can. And of course, we talked about resistance training and strength, but even if that hasn't come into your life yet, there's a few things that I think are good ideas. Number one, on your walks, try to go up a hill. So there's a unique property in the terms of human biomechanics that going up a hill actually engages certain kinds of muscles. And if you haven't done it in a long time, you might actually finding it a bit challenging. And I'm not talking about training like Rocky. I'm just talking about going up a hill. What I do myself, there's a set of stairs at a local high school. It's probably about 50 steps. So on my walks, I actually will climb up the 50 steps. And once again, the act of lifting up your hip a certain distance to come up onto the stairs and the muscles that are contracted, these things add a new element to your walking routine that actually gives you extra benefits. So those
That's a great idea.
Yeah. The step thing in particular, if you haven't done it, you might surprise yourself the amount of gains you get from it. So those are just some of the small things that I can recommend to people who like the walking journey but want to do a little bit more.
Excellent. I often see people sometimes, just driving around town, walking, you see people moving their arms, raising their arms up and down over their head or out to the side or doing little dumbbell weights.
Absolutely.
So there's ways you can even increase your challenge around walking, like stairs or going up a hill. That's fantastic. Great tip. And then, the next stage is probably starting to think about, as we talked about previously, which is getting into some resistance training. Now, that also can be daunting to people.
Sure.
Right? And we won't get into the specifics of how to engage in resistance training because that's when oftentimes engaging a professional trainer, for example, is really helpful, like seeking out someone or a physician or a physiotherapist or a chiropractor, someone who's knowledgeable in muscle and joint medicine and exercise to help you on the next steps. And that can be really helpful, especially to take some of the fear of starting something new away, that maybe you're stepping outside of your comfort zone.
Great recommendation. And my personal experience is that my patients here at Medcan have really enjoyed their time with people like you, with people like the trainers. They like the guidance and they like the ability to get the feedback on the spot. Some of these people, if your first journey is from zero to then walking, well, that next step can sometimes feel a little bit confusing, complicated, or daunting.
Yeah.
And a professional who will tailor your program, the program to your needs, can be extraordinarily helpful.
Absolutely. I was reading recently, there was some Canadian guidelines around how people exercise. There's walking, there's indoor group classes, outdoor group classes, all these things that are benefit in different ways to do it. But one of the things that these people were talking about was how, doing formal exercise like gym exercise facilitates home exercise. Like, so doing a match of walking and going, maybe you go to a gym one day and then you walk 5 days. And then maybe you add in other things, like maybe you go to the local pool or you go to the lake if you happen to have access to water, or you're trying a bike or all of those things. Because now you're just starting to get into an actual fitness way of life or fitness routine where you're doing multiple things and multiple ways of challenging your health and fitness, which really is going to start to increase your probabilities of not dying over time.
Yeah, that was really well said. Fitness way of life. And whatever the initial steps are, whether they're literally or metaphorically walking, but to change your entire mindset so that you're the kind of person who not only believes in movement, but needs the movement and understands that it's a vital part of your health and wellness. That was well said, Andy.
Well, Nelson, thank you so much. However you get started, it's important to get started. We know that, as we said, outside of stopping smoking, getting out and moving and exercising, like doing walking, is the single best thing you can do for your health and longevity moving forward. So I hope this conversation, which I really enjoyed, is going to encourage you all to just get out and move. If you haven't moved before, just get out and move. So thank you, Dr. Ferreira. It was really great seeing you in person for once in a long time. And also talking about this really important topic of going from nothing to something.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed our chat.
That was our Move host, Dr. Andrew Miners, Medcan's Clinical and Product Director of Sports Medicine, Therapy, Rehabilitation, and Fitness, in conversation with Medcan MD, Dr. Nelson Ferreira.
You can book a consultation with a Medcan trainer by emailing fitness@medcan.com.
Follow Medcan at Medcan LiveWell.
And we'll post episode highlights and links that you can visit on our website, which is eatmovethinkpodcast.com.
Lots of studies about the benefits of walking. If you're looking for evidence, statistics, facts about the benefits of walking for your overall wellness, Eat, Move, Think podcast is a place to go.
We also link to Dave Paul's podcast, which is an amazing resource and fun to listen to when you're going for your daily walk.
I like that guy. Say hello and send us a tip or a suggestion by emailing us at info@eatmovethinkpodcast.com.
Send us a selfie of your walk. Eat, Move, Think is produced by Ghost Bureau. I'm Jasmine Ratch, managing producer.
Social media and strategy support is from Chantal Gertin, Andrew Imax, and Emily Bozick, as well as our interns, Naman Dutta and Amanda Serafina James. I'm executive producer Christopher Scholgen.
We'll be back soon with a new episode examining the latest in health and wellness. This podcast episode is intended to provide general information about health and wellness only and is not designed or intended to constitute or be used as a substitute for medical advice, treatment, or diagnosis. You should always talk to your Medcan healthcare provider for individual medical advice, diagnosis, and treatment, including your specific health and wellness needs. This podcast is based on the information available at the time of preparation and is only accurate and current as of that date. Source information and recommendations are subject to change based on scientific evidence as it evolves over time. Medcan is not responsible for future changes or updates to the information and recommendations and assumes no obligation to update based on future developments. Reference to or mention of specific treatments or therapies does not constitute or imply a recommendation or endorsement. The links provided within the associated document are to assist the reader with any specific information highlighted. Any third-party links are not endorsed by Medcan.